The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was older than human civilization itself. Its walls were made of pale stone that seemed to glow with inner light. Delegates from 17 different alien species sat in a wide circle, their strange bodies filling seats that had been designed to fit creatures of every shape and size. The air smelled of chemicals and perfumes from a dozen different worlds. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood alone in the center of this circle. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many negotiations go wrong. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Beside him stood his aide, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, a young woman with dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. The Volanthi Primarch towered over everyone in the room. He was an insectoid creature nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the light like broken mirrors. His mandibles clicked together as he spoke, and his voice came through the translation device, as cold and sharp as broken glass. "The terms are simple," the Primarch said. "Humanity will give up all colonies in the Orion Reach. Your people will accept travel restrictions within your own solar system. The 140,000 humans on New Valencia will be moved to work camps on our homeworld. You have no choice in this matter." Daniel felt Maria tense beside him. He understood why. These were not terms for peace. These were terms for slavery. He looked around the great hall at the other delegates. The Rithani were beings of living crystal, ancient and wise. They sat perfectly still, their bodies humming with soft light. The Korvathi had gray skin and large black eyes. They watched everything but said nothing. The smaller species, the Meridians and the Thelani and the others, kept their heads down and avoided eye contact. Not one of them spoke up. Not one of them objected. Daniel had spent 40 years in diplomatic service. He had learned to read rooms, to understand the unspoken messages that passed between delegates. What he read in this room was simple and terrible. Everyone had already decided humanity was alone. "May I ask why?" Daniel said. His voice was calm. He had learned long ago that anger was useless in negotiation. "We have followed every rule. We have honored every treaty. What have we done to deserve this?" The Primarch's mandibles clicked in what Daniel recognized as laughter. "You exist, Ambassador. You breed too fast. You spread too far. In 300 years, you have colonized 47 worlds. Your population has grown from 8 billion to 90 billion. If we let you continue, you will outnumber us all. And that frightens you. It should frighten everyone." The Primarch gestured at the silent delegates around the room. "Your species is like a disease, Ambassador. A well-meaning disease, perhaps, but a disease nonetheless. We are simply applying the cure before it is too late." He understood now. This was not about anything humanity had done. This was about what humanity might become. The older species, the ones who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, were afraid. And afraid people did terrible things. He looked once more around the room. At the Rithani, who had lived for 9,000 years and seen empires rise and fall. At the Korvathi, who prided themselves on their logic and fairness. At all the others who sat in silence and let this happen. Then Daniel picked up his datapad from the table. "Lieutenant Commander Santos," he said quietly. "Please tell the ship we are leaving." Maria's eyes widened, but she nodded and stepped away to use her communicator. The Primarch leaned forward. "Ambassador Carter, where do you think you are going?" "We are not finished here." "Yes, we are." Daniel tucked the datapad under his arm. "You have said what you want. The Concord has shown its position through its silence. Humanity does not accept your terms, cannot reject them. You are too weak to fight us, perhaps." Daniel walked toward the exit. He could feel every eye in the room following him. "But there is something you do not understand about humans, Primarch. We have never needed to know we would win before we fought. We only needed to know we were right." He paused at the door and turned back to face the assembled delegates one final time. His voice carried clearly across the silent hall. "You have all chosen your sides today. I hope you remember this moment when you realize what that choice cost you." And with that, Ambassador Daniel Carter walked out of the Grand Chamber. The Primarch watched him go. His mandibles clicked with amusement. Let him run back to his little world, he said to the other delegates. In 6 cycles, when their colonies burn and their people beg for mercy, he will understand the true order of things. The Rathani elder, a being of pale blue crystal named Varath, said nothing. But deep within its ancient consciousness, a memory stirred. A warning passed down through countless generations. From a time before the Velanthi, or the Korvathi, or any of the younger races. Be careful of the species that fights without hope. They are the most dangerous of all. On the human ship Artemis, Daniel Carter sat alone in his cabin. Through the window, he could see the stars sliding past as the ship accelerated toward home. Each one of those stars might have worlds around it. Each world might have people who would soon be at war. Maria knocked on his door and entered without waiting for an answer. She carried 2 cups of coffee and handed one to him. "Did I do the right thing?" Daniel asked. He suddenly felt very old. "You did the only thing," Maria said. She sat down across from him. "What they asked for was surrender. Slavery. The end of everything we have built. You could not accept that. I may have just started a war we cannot win. Maybe." Maria sipped her coffee. "But there are worse things than losing a war, Ambassador. There is giving up without a fight. There is letting them take everything we are without even trying to stop them." She looked at him with those sharp, dark eyes. "That is not who we are." Daniel thought about the colony worlds, about the 90 billion humans spread across 47 planets, about the children who would grow up in a galaxy that saw them as a disease to be cured. "No," he said finally. "That is not who we are." He stood up and walked to the communication panel. It was time to call Earth. Time to tell them what had happened. Time to prepare for what was coming. The galaxy thought humanity was weak. The galaxy thought humanity would submit. The galaxy was about to learn how wrong it was. The news spread across. Human space like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every colony knew what had happened. The Velanthi had made demands that amounted to slavery. Ambassador Carter had walked out. War was coming. On Earth. In the headquarters of the United Nations Space Command. Admiral Patricia Holloway read the report for the 5th time. She was 58 years old, with brown hair that was going gray and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She had commanded humanity's fleet for 7 years. In all that time, she had never fought a major battle. The human navy was built for peace, not war. "How bad is it?" she asked. General Kevin Moore sat across from her. He was a large man with a shaved head and hands that had once held a rifle on 3 different colony worlds. Now those hands held only data pads and reports. "Bad," he said. "We have about 400 ships that can fight. The Velanthi have 12,000. Our army numbers may be 20 million if we call up all reserves. Their army numbers in the hundreds of billions." Patricia closed her eyes. The numbers were impossible. What about allies? The Rithani? The Korvathi? Both have said they will not get involved. They are betting on us losing. They're betting on the safe choice. Yes.
God.
Patricia stood and walked to the window. Below her, the lights of Geneva sparkled in the evening darkness. Somewhere out there, 90 billion people were living their lives, working, sleeping, loving. Most of them did not yet know that everything might end in a few weeks. "Get me Admiral Carter," she said, "and call a meeting of the Joint Chiefs." 1 hour. Kevin hesitated. "Admiral, what are you going to tell them?" Patricia did not turn around. "I am going to tell them what we have always known. That humanity does not survive by being the strongest. We survive by refusing to give up." She finally looked back at him. "We are not going to surrender, Kevin. And we are not going to run. If the Velanthi want our worlds, they will have to pay for every single one." In the days that followed, something strange happened across human space. There was fear, of course. How could there not be? But beneath the fear, something else grew. Something that surprised even the humans themselves. Defiance. On Mars, the colonial government voted to reject any surrender. The vote was unanimous. Not one person spoke in favor of giving up. On Titan, workers in the atmospheric processing plants organized volunteer defense forces. They had no military training. They had no weapons, but they had determination, and that was a start on New Valencia. The very world the Valencia demanded as tribute, the people began building defenses. They dug trenches. They fortified buildings. They turned their farming equipment into weapons. A reporter asked the colonial governor if he thought they could win. The governor, an old man named Henry Walsh, simply smiled and said, "We will make them remember us." And on Earth, something even more remarkable happened. The old nations, which had spent centuries fighting over land and resources and ideology, suddenly fell silent. The arguments that had seemed so important yesterday now seemed meaningless. 4. The first time in human history, the entire species spoke with one voice. No, the Valencia Primarch received this message and laughed. "Let them make noise," he told his advisors. It changes nothing. In 2 weeks, they will learn the price of defiance. He ordered the fleet to advance. Patricia Holloway stood before the Joint Chiefs of Staff in a room deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. 12 men and women, the highest military commanders in human space, looked at her and waited for her to speak. "You have all seen the numbers," she said. "You know what we are facing? By every measure, we should lose this war. The Valencia are stronger, more numerous, more experienced. They have been fighting wars since before our ancestors learned to make fire." She paused and looked at each of them in turn. "But I did not call you here to tell you we are doomed. I called you here to tell you we are going to win." Admiral George Palmer, commander of the Jupiter Defense Fleet, leaned forward. "With respect, Admiral, how? We cannot match their numbers. We cannot match their firepower. We cannot match anything. We cannot match them in a straight fight," Patricia agreed. "So we will not fight straight. We will make them pay for every inch of space they take. We will attack where they do not expect. We will make this war so costly that they will wish they had never started it." She activated the holographic display behind her. A map of human space appeared, with the Valencia invasion routes marked in red. Their first target will be the Orion Reach. Small colonies, easy targets. Expect to roll over them in days. She touched the display and a new set of markers appeared. "We will not stop them. We do not have the ships. But we will slow them down. We will bleed them. And while they are busy in the Reach, we will be building." General Carol Santos, head of ground forces, frowned. "Building what?" "Ships, weapons, soldiers, everything." Patricia smiled grimly. "The Valencia think this war will be over in weeks. We're going to make it last years. We're going to turn every colony into a fortress, every city into a trap, every battle into a nightmare. And eventually, when they have lost enough ships and enough soldiers, they will start to wonder if we are worth the cost." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Palmer nodded slowly. "It is not much of a plan." "No," Patricia agreed. "But it is the only plan we have, and it might just work." She looked around the room one more time. "We have 2 weeks before they reach the first colony. I suggest we get started." The meeting ended, and the commanders scattered to their posts. Ships were launched. Factories began running day and night. Training camps filled with volunteers who had never held a weapon in their lives, and across the galaxy. The other species watched and wondered. The Rethany elders, ancient and wise, observed with something that might have been curiosity. The Korvathi analyzed the data and found it confusing. The smaller species, those who had been conquered or enslaved or simply ignored, watched with a feeling they barely recognized. Hope on the edge of human space. The Valencia First Fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 300 warships, each one capable of destroying a city, formed up and began their advance. The war had begun. The colony of Horizon's End was a small world on the edge of human space. 12,000 people lived there, mostly farmers and their families. They had spent 3 generations turning a barren rock into a place where crops could grow and children could play under an alien sun. It was not much by galactic standards, but it was home. When the Valencia fleet appeared in the sky, the colonists knew what it meant. There would be no evacuation. There would be no rescue. The human navy was too far away and too small to help. They were on their own. Fleet Commander Vorax watched the planet on his tactical display and felt satisfaction. this would be easy. A few patrol ships, some orbital platforms, nothing that would survive the first attack. Open communications, he ordered. Let us give them a chance to surrender. The human who appeared on screen was young, barely 30 years old. Captain Samuel Brooks commanded the patrol vessel Defiant, a small ship with a crew of 83. His face showed no fear, only a quiet determination that Vorax found strange. Fleet Commander, Samuel said, you are in human space. You have 10 minutes to leave. Vorax's mandibles clicked with amusement. You threaten us? With what? Your single ship? One have 300 vessels? You have nothing. I have the Defiant. She will do. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious. Samuel leaned forward slightly. You came here thinking this would be easy, that we would run, or beg, or simply give up. But you do not understand humans. We do not think about odds the way you do. We decide what is right, and then we fight for it, even when you cannot win, especially then, because that is when it matters most. Vorax felt something he had not felt in centuries of command. A small whisper of doubt. Not fear exactly. There was nothing to fear from one human ship, but something close to it. He pushed the feeling aside. Your 10 minutes are over, Captain. Fire at will. What followed was not a battle. It was a lesson. The Defiant lasted 14 minutes. In that time, Captain Samuel Brooks and his crew destroyed 2 Volanthi destroyers and badly damaged a third. They took hit after hit. Their shields failed. Their hull broke open. Their systems died one by one. Still, they fought. The final transmission from the Defiant came as the ship began to break apart. Captain Brooks stood on his burning bridge, his face bloody, his uniform torn. But his eyes were clear, and his voice was steady. This is Captain Samuel Brooks of the Earth vessel Defiant. To whoever finds this message, tell them we did not surrender. Tell them we made them pay. And tell them this is only the beginning. Then the Defiant was gone, scattered across the void in a million burning pieces. On his flagship, Fleet Commander Vorax stood in silence. 2 destroyers lost, a third crippled. Hundreds of Volanthi dead. All because of one human ship, sir. His aide asked. Do we continue with the ground attack? Vorax shook himself. Yes, of course. One ship means nothing. Launch the landing forces. But as he watched the transport ships descend toward Horizon's End, he could not forget the image of that human captain's face, the certainty in his eyes, the complete lack of doubt. What kind of species fights like that? On the surface of Horizon's End, 12,000 civilians waited. They had no military training, no real weapons, no hope of rescue. They had only what they had built with their own hands over 3 generations. They had only their refusal to give up. When the Volanthi ground forces landed, they expected an easy occupation. What they found was something else entirely. The colonists had turned their irrigation systems into traps. They had converted their farming machines into weapons. They had prepared ambushes and hidden defenses with the same cleverness they had used to tame an alien world. Old Henry Walsh, the colonial governor, led the defense himself. He was 72 years old and had never fired a weapon in his life. Now he stood on the roof of the Colonial Administration building with a rifle in his hands and fire in his eyes. They want our world, he told the fighters around him. Let us make them earn it. The conquest of Horizon's End took 3 days instead of 3 hours. Over 2,000 Volanthi soldiers died. The colonists lost nearly 4,000 of their own, including children, including elderly, including people who had never wanted to fight at all. But when it was over, when the Volanthi flag finally rose above the ruins of the colonial capital, something had changed. Fleet Commander Vorax looked at the casualty reports and felt something cold settle in his chest. 3 days. 2,000 soldiers. For one tiny farming colony that nobody had ever heard of. The Volanthi Dominion controlled 2,000 worlds. Humanity had 40-7. How many soldiers would it cost to take them all? The news of Horizon's End spread across the galaxy. The official Volanthi report called it a minor engagement, a small delay on the path to inevitable victory. But the other species heard a different story. They heard about a single ship that fought until it was destroyed rather than surrender. They heard about farmers and families who turned their homes into fortresses. They heard about an old man named Henry Walsh who died on the third day with a weapon in his hands and a smile on his face. The Rathani elders, those ancient beings of living crystal, heard the story and remembered their own history. Long ago, before they became wise and cautious, they too had fought like this. They had almost forgotten what it felt like. The Korvathi heard the story and found their calculations failing. The numbers did not add up. One small colony should not have cost so much. One small ship should not have destroyed 2 destroyers. Something was wrong with their models, and the smaller species, those who had been conquered or oppressed or simply ignored for so long, heard the story and felt something stir in their hearts. If the humans could fight like this, if they could make the mighty Volanthi bleed for a single farming colony, then maybe the galaxy was not as fixed and unchangeable as everyone believed. On Earth, Admiral Patricia Holloway received the reports from Horizon's End. She read about the Defiant in its final transmission. She read about Henry Walsh and his impossible defense. She read about the 4,000 dead and the 12,000 who had fought anyway. She allowed herself one moment of grief, one moment to feel the weight of what had been lost. Then she called her staff together. "What happened at Horizon's End changes everything," she said. "They expected us to be easy. We showed them they were wrong. Now we show them again and again until they understand that every human world will cost them more than they can afford to pay." The war had only begun, but something had shifted, something that the Volanthi did not yet understand. Humanity was not going to make this easy. Humanity was going to make this hell. 6 months into the war, the Volanthi Dominion had captured 18 human colonies. They had also lost 47 ships and nearly 100,000 soldiers in the process. The numbers made no sense. On the Korvathi homeworld, Ambassador Keth studied the latest reports with growing concern. The Rathani representative sat across from him, its crystal body humming with a soft light that Keth had learned to read as worry. "They are still fighting," Keth said. It was not a question. They are. The Rathani pulsed gently. And more than that, they are winning. That is impossible. They are outnumbered, outgunned. Their factories cannot match the Dominion's output. And yet, the Rathani showed him a display. Ship losses, troop casualties, resource costs, all of them favored the humans, against every logical expectation. "They do not fight as we fight, Ambassador. They do not accept the mathematics of war as we understand it." Keth studied the display. Every battle followed the same pattern. Human forces would engage, take terrible losses, appear to be beaten, and then somehow they would win anyway. They used strategies that made no sense. They sacrificed ships to protect civilians. They attacked when they should have retreated. They refused to surrender even when surrender was the obvious choice. The Volanthi called them a plague, Keth said slowly. Perhaps they were right, but not in the way they meant. Explain. Plague spreads because it cannot be stopped by normal means. Because it changes and adapts. Because it finds a way. Shush. Keth looked up at his colleague. The humans are not spreading because they are weak. They are spreading because they are something we have never seen before. A species that does not know when to quit. 300 light-years away, Admiral Patricia Holloway stood on the bridge of the newly built battleship Perseverance. Around her, the combined human fleet prepared for the largest battle in the history of the species. 6 months ago, humanity had 400 warships. Now they had over 600. They had been built in secret shipyards, hidden in asteroid belts and behind gas giants. They were crewed by volunteers from every human world, people who had never planned to be soldiers, but had chosen to become them anyway. Is more. The Volanthi fleet is entering the system. Commander Lisa Mitchell, her tactical officer, marked the enemy formation on the display. 460 vessels. They are heading straight for New Carthage. New Carthage. A colony of 30 million people. A world humanity had spent a century building. If it fell, the entire Orion Reach would be lost. then that is where we make our stand. Patricia looked around at her bridge crew. Young faces, determined expressions. Not one of them showed doubt. Signal all ships. Operation Thermopylae is go. The Battle of New Carthage would be studied in military schools across the galaxy for centuries. Not because of its tactics, though those were clever. Not because of its scale, though that was impressive. But because of what it showed. For 12 hours, 600 human ships fought 460 Volanthi warships. The humans were outmatched in firepower, in armor, in experience. By every standard measure, they should have lost. Instead, they won. They won because their captains took risks that no sensible commander would take. They won because their crews fought with a fury that the Valentia had never encountered. They won because, in the critical moments, when logic said to retreat, they charged forward instead. Captain Samuel Brooks was there. He had survived the destruction of the Defiant, pulled from the wreckage by a passing merchant ship. His body was still healing, held together by metal and medicine. But when the call came for volunteers, he had been the first to answer. He commanded the destroyer Redemption Now, a ship built in the weeks after Horizon's End. Its crew were mostly civilians who had learned to fight in the past 6 months. But they fought like veterans. "Captain, the enemy flagship is weakening," his tactical officer reported, "but we have taken heavy damage. Shields are at 12%. Hull breaches on 3 decks. Samuel looked at the display. The Valenthi command ship was right there, so close he could almost touch it. If it fell, the entire enemy fleet would lose coordination. The battle might be won in a single stroke, but reaching it would mean flying through a wall of enemy fire. It would mean almost certain destruction. Samuel thought about the Defiant, about his crew who had died, about his promise that their sacrifice was only the beginning. "All hands," he said into the ship-wide communicator. "This is the captain. The enemy flagship is within range. Taking it out will win this battle. It will also probably cost us everything." He paused. "I am not going to order anyone to do this, but I am going to do it myself. Anyone who wants to join me, stay at your post. Anyone who does not, I will not blame you." Not one person moved. Not one person left their station. Samuel smiled. "Then let us show them what humans are made of. All power to engines." Ramming speed, the Redemption did not survive the attack. But neither did the Valenthi flagship. When the enemy command ship exploded, taking the Redemption with it, the Valanthi fleet fell into confusion. Human ships pressed the advantage. Within 2 hours, 312 Valanthi vessels were destroyed or captured. The human fleet had lost 241 ships. But New Carthage still stood, and something had shifted. In the halls of the Galactic Concord, the delegates who had sat in silence during those first negotiations began to whisper. The Rihani sent a formal request for talks with Earth. The Korvathi quietly began reviewing their policy of staying out of the war. The smaller species watched and wondered. If humanity could stand against the Valanthi, what did that mean for the Old Order? What did it mean for them? On the Valanthi homeworld, the Primarch received news of the defeat, with something close to panic. In 6 months, his quick and easy victory had become a disaster. His casualties were mounting. His resources were draining, and he could see no end in sight. How? He demanded of his advisors. They are a young species, a weak species. How are they doing this? None of them had an answer. The truth was something they could not understand. Humanity was not winning because they were stronger. They were winning because they had something to fight for. They were winning because every soldier knew exactly why they were there and exactly what would happen if they failed. They were winning because they refused to accept any other outcome. On a hospital ship orbiting New Carthage, Captain Samuel Brooks woke up in a medical bed. His body was broken in 17 places. His ship was gone. Most of his crew was dead. But they had one. A nurse came to check on him. She was young, barely 20, with tired eyes and hands that shook slightly as she worked. "Captain Brooks," she said, "how are you feeling?" Samuel looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the war was still going on. More battles would be fought. More people would die. But something had changed today. Something important. "You're not done yet," he said quietly. "This is just the beginning." The nurse smiled despite her exhaustion. "I know, Captain. I know." The tide was turning. And the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. 1 year after Ambassador Daniel Carter walked out of the peace negotiations, he walked back in. The Grand Chamber on Verith Prime looked the same. The same pale stone walls, the same ancient seats arranged in a circle, the same recycled air that smelled of a dozen different worlds, but everything else had changed. The Valanthi delegation was smaller now. The Primarch who had made those arrogant demands was gone, replaced by a lesser official whose mandibles clicked nervously. The Korvathi, who had stayed neutral, now sat on the human side of the table. The Rafani had taken position directly behind Daniel's chair, a sign of support that had never been seen before in the history of the Concord and the smaller species. Those who had watched from the sidelines a year ago now looked at the human delegation with something new in their eyes, not fear, not pity, respect. Daniel stood at the center of the chamber, older than he had been, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines on his face. But his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. "We are here because the Valanthi Dominion has asked for an end to the fighting," he said. "Before we discuss terms, I want to be clear about something." He looked directly at the Valanthi representative. "Humanity is not here to humiliate you. We are not here for revenge. We are here to build a peace that will last." The Valanthi official shifted in his seat. "The Dominion recognizes that certain mistakes were made. We are prepared to discuss reasonable terms." Mistakes. Daniel let the word hang in the air. "You invaded our space. You killed our people. You took our worlds. And you call it a mistake, Ambassador Carter? We simply—" "Let me finish." Daniel's voice was calm, but carried an edge that silenced the room. 47,000 humans died in this war. Soldiers, civilians, children. 47,000 people who would still be alive if you had simply left us alone. But you were right about one thing. Mistakes were made, just not by us. He walked slowly around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegation. 1 year ago, I stood in this very place and told you that humanity would fight. Every delegate in this room dismissed that warning. The Valanthea thought we were bluffing. The rest of you thought we were foolish. You all believed that strength was the only thing that mattered, and that we did not have enough. Daniel stopped in the center of the circle. You were wrong. Strength is not measured in ships or soldiers. It is measured in will, in determination, in the refusal to give up even when every logical calculation says you should. He returned to his seat. So here are humanity's terms. First, all Valanthi forces will leave human space immediately. Second, the galaxy will formally recognize human control over our existing colonies and reasonable room to expand. Third, the Dominion will pay for the damage they caused to our worlds and our people. Fourth, and most importantly, there will be a formal declaration that the rights of all species in this galaxy are equal. No exceptions. No special privileges for the old powers. Everyone is treated the same. The Valanthi official's mandibles clicked rapidly. These terms are very demanding. They are also fair. We could ask for much more. We could demand that you give up your military. We could demand your territory. We could demand that you be removed from the Galactic Concord entirely. Daniel leaned forward. But that is not who we are. We did not fight this war to become the thing we were fighting against. We fought to earn our place in this galaxy. And now that we have it, we are going to use it to build something better. The chamber fell silent. The Korvathi exchanged glances. The Rathani pulsed with soft light. The smaller delegations whispered among themselves. Then the Rathani elder spoke. Its voice was ancient, heavy with the weight of thousands of years. The Rafani collective has watched this conflict with great interest. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have seen species consumed by their own pride. We have seen the strong destroy the weak, without consequence. the crystal being moved to the center of the chamber. And then we saw humanity. You did not win this war through better technology or larger numbers. You won it through something much more rare, an unshakable belief that your cause was just, and the willingness to give everything in its defense. That is something we have not seen in a very long time. The elder turned to face the full assembly. The Rathani Collective supports humanity's terms. Furthermore, we propose a formal alliance between our peoples. The old order of this galaxy must change. Today is the beginning of that change. The chamber erupted in whispers. An alliance between the Rathani and humanity was something nobody had ever imagined. It would change everything about how the galaxy worked. The Korvathi representative stood. The Korvathi Republic agrees with this proposal. We too have learned from this war. Staying neutral while injustice happens is not wisdom. It is cowardice. We will not make that mistake again. One by one, the smaller delegations added their voices. The Meridians, who had lost their homeworld to the Velanthi long ago, wept as they offered their support. The Thalani, whose ancestors had been slaves, spoke of a future they had never dared to hope for. And the Velanthi, isolated and beaten, had no choice but to accept. When the treaty was signed, Daniel Carter walked out of the Grand Chamber and stood on the steps, looking up at the alien stars. Admiral Patricia Holloway stood beside him. She looked tired but satisfied. "You did it," she said quietly. "You actually did it." "We did it," Daniel corrected. "All of us. Every soldier who fought, every civilian who refused to surrender, every person who believed we could win, even when it seemed impossible." He smiled, suddenly looking very old. "I just walked out of a room." "You were the ones who showed them what that meant," Patricia nodded. "So what happens now?" Daniel considered the question. The galaxy was changed, but the work was far from over. There would be challenges ahead. Old hatreds. New conflicts. The endless task of building a better future. But for the first time in a very long time, that future looked bright. "Now we do what humans have always done," he said. "We keep going. We keep building. And we keep proving that strength is not about how hard you can hit. It is about what you are willing to fight for." In the years that followed, the galaxy would remember this time as the beginning of a new era. The era when humanity stopped asking for permission and started earning respect. The era when the old order fell and something better rose in its place. And in the histories of the Rathani, in the records of the Korvathi, in the stories told on 1,000 worlds, the lesson was passed down through generations. Never underestimate a species that fights without hope of winning. They are not the weakest among the stars. They are the strongest. And when the universe itself seemed set against them, simply refused to lose. That was humanity. That was their gift to the galaxy. Not weapons or technology or numbers, just the simple, stubborn refusal to ever give up.